Anthony, have you ever had a setback in your life or your career that you thought maybe you wouldn't be able to come back from?
Without a doubt, multiple times, not only in my career, but in my life. And I've seen it I've been in leadership for over 25 years, and I've seen people that have made decisions that they thought they would never recover from, and they're thriving. And I've also seen some where individuals have not been able to recover from it. It paralyzed them. And today we have a conversation where we walk through a couple of those scenarios. So I hope you as the listener can think back to some of those instances. And I know all of you have them, where you made a mistake or something happened and you didn't think you'd be able to recover.
Welcome to Grandpa and the Millennial, the podcast for thought-provoking leadership conversations sparked from real-life leadership journeys. I'm here with Anthony, the Grandpa. I'm Natasha, the Millennial, and our mission is to help you, the professional leader or new entrepreneur, effectively influence, inspire, and develop both yourself and those you lead.
On today's episode, we have an exciting guest. My friend and my wife and project and sales coordinator, United States Marine, Amy Lopez. She's going to walk through a couple of different topics. The first is how you engage and connect with just about anybody, owning your mistakes and owning them quickly. And then last, she's going to talk about how you embrace change, how you come from being a small town girl transitioning into the United States Marine Corps. So sit back, listen in, and enjoy this episode of Grandpa and the Millennial.
I have 3 children, Candace, Jonathan, and Donovan, and 2 beautiful grandbabies, Brooklyn and Elijah, and 2 weenie dogs. I'm a project and sales coordinator for a construction company specializing in roof and solar, and I've worked pretty much in the construction business for the last 8 years.
Excellent. Well, we're really looking forward to hearing all about your journey and your career and some of the advice you have. So, Amy, tell us your story. Take us back to the beginning.
All right. Well, I was born and raised in Woodland, California, right outside of Sacramento. I have an older sister, just one sibling. She's 6 years older than me. My mom and dad are still in the same home that I was raised in, so I go visit them when I can. I was raised in a pretty happy, normal childhood. We went to church twice on Sundays and every Wednesday, so I had a lot of friends in the church. I had a lot of friends at school. I didn't really go, without. My parents didn't spoil us or anything like that. I mean, there's a lot of lessons along the way I'll probably share, but we were very comfortable, happy. That's just what I remember, having a happy childhood. I went to the same elementary school as my sister did.
And would you say that you grew up in a middle class? Where was your income? Were you guys rich? Were you guys middle class, low class? How would you classify yourself?
We were definitely rich in love, and I would say we were probably middle class. My father worked as a director of juvenile hall for quite some time and then moved on to the county. He was an employment specialist where he retired doing that. And then my mom worked at the school district for about 22 years, part-time whenever we were in school. So she was home whenever we were home.
Oh, interesting. And so let's take us to your high school years. What were your high school years like? Were you an academic? Were you a cheerleader? Were you an athlete? What did it look like?
I'm laughing because I tried out for the cheerleading team, and if I could have had a shot at tequila then, I probably would have made the team. I was a beat behind everybody else. I played volleyball for 1 year in junior high, and then throughout growing up, I did gymnastics, ballet, taekwondo for a few years. I was a pretty good student, stayed on the honor roll until I got my license my junior year. That was kind of when I knew what I needed to do to graduate and what credits I needed, but I knew what to do to have fun and just kind of, I could have put more effort into it for sure for my school.
So school wasn't your focus. It
No.
wasn't your priority. So in that vein, you didn't have athletics and you didn't have any extracurricular activities as far as school went. but were you focused on the next step as far as going to college, and what did that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. Growing up, I always wanted to be either like a vet or a marine biologist. I started working at a lumber yard. So minimum wage then was $4.25 an hour. And I was making $6.10 an hour. So I was really excited about that. And I also took that class during my senior year. So it was called work experience.
So hold on real quick. So everyone knows Natasha's $6.10 an hour. Back then was a lot of money. That was a good wage.
Well, I could tell $2 above minimum wage. You're doing your thing.
Exactly. Which is really funny. I just thought of it right now that circles back kind of to construction. As I was working at this lumber yard, little did I know where I'd end up. But I knew at the time I didn't want to go to college right away out of high school, but I didn't want to work at a lumber yard all my life either. So that's when I kind of made the decision. I thought, maybe military. And I can do college. I can get the GI Bill and all that good stuff. But I needed to kind of get out. Woodland's a small town. I loved it. But I needed to, that was my kick in the butt to get out.
And what was drawing you to the military? Right? I mean, of all choices, what drew you to the military?
Well, I joined the Marine Corps, which is the toughest. And I always tell people I was looking for a few good men.
You found one.
Natasha probably has no idea.
It's a movie, I think.
Yes. So no, that's my joke. But there was no question of what branch I was going to join if I joined.
So before we get into obviously the choice that you made, what you as a person, so Amy as like a young, kid and then teenager, what type of person, personality wise, what were you like?
Very talkative, very social.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'll talk later too about personality tests. Which I'm a total fan of and didn't know at the time. But I would say if you're familiar with like the DISC personality test, definitely an I, influential, and a D, little dominant, I think, but in a good way. But I was just always I went to school basically to see the next outfits people were wearing, what I was going to wear that day and mingle.
Yeah.
Choosing the Marine Corps, you said it was because of the heart. Did you have a recruiter that was pushing you that way? And how old were you when you decided you were going to join the Marine Corps? And what aside from being the hardest, was there a career that you thought you would have there? Was there a job that you wanted to go after? Just give us a little bit of insight into that journey.
So I started my senior year when I was 16. I'm a September birthday, so I was going to graduate at 17. I knew that I would have to have my parents sign for me if you're going into the military before you're 18. So I just walked right into the recruiter's office. My parents were always they were always against it. They didn't think that I should be in the military. So I walked right in there and just started talking to the recruiter, and he sold me on all kinds of stuff. He said, hey, we'll guarantee you business administration. So I thought that would be amazing. I had my set, date to go. It's called the delayed entry program. And that's when I had to have a conversation with my parents and have them sign for me. So I sold them on it. They went ahead and signed.
Well, was that a long conversation? Was it one conversation or their 17-year-old daughter's going off into the Marine Corps? So
it might have been a two-parter conversation, multiple conversations.
And I think it was around 92 that you went in, right? Into the Marine Corps?
93.
93. So this is post the first Gulf War. So
Correct.
This isn't as if it's a decision where it's during a peacetime. This is when there's a lot of conflict going on in the world. So what were the conversations like with your parents and them saying, hey, and were you aware like this is a possibility you could end up back overseas and in a situation where you're either fighting or supporting the troops?
So I absolutely knew that if I joined the Marine Corps, that if there's war or I needed to go overseas, like that is what I was going to do. That didn't scare me. I'm not much of a planner, so I'm just kind of like, let's just jump right into this and whatever happens, happens. My parents know, I guess I could have added earlier to the personality part, I'm a little headstrong. So they kind of knew once I came to them with this decision that it was what I wanted to do. So they just wanted me to be happy. They did try to talk me into going in the Air Force. They felt that that might be a better place at the time for a female, better education, better benefits, which is, those parts are true. But I just told them this is what I want to do. So they said, as long as you're happy, we support it. Now, looking back, my mom did say, I wish I would have let you make that decision on your own at 18, just to kind of like throw her hands back and say, because there were some tough times. So she did mention that part, but.
Oh, that's a good point, because they had to give the okay.
Correct.
Because you were younger. Yeah,
Yep.
that's interesting.
Yeah, I had my 18th birthday in boot camp.
Would you two sign your 16-year-olds good to go now if they were?
I would have.
Would you?
Yeah, I think so. I'm kind of surprised that none of the kids went that route.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you ask that question, you know the personality, and you know the typically that is made for that environment, and the Marines and all of the different services will turn you into a fighting machine, so to speak. But you have to have that foundation. And our kids chose to go to college, which is excellent and outstanding. And if they would have come to us and we saw that spark and that edge to them, I absolutely would have.
Yeah, same. And I know my dad, he didn't really want his baby girl, I don't think, right, to go join the Marine Corps, but he knew that I'd be okay. In fact, the one thing he told me, he's like, and he said this with love, so don't get me wrong or whatever, but he said, you kind of have, a smart mouth. Like, are you sure you're going to be able to do that? And I said, yeah, because I'm volunteering to do this. I know what I think I know what I'm getting into, but I know that I'm the one signing this too. And that's what my choice is. And I have to take what they dish out. So it's kind of a different perspective, I guess, than.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to you go to boot camp, and boot camp in the Marine Corps is 13 weeks, or it was 13 weeks at the time that we went through. So that first month that you're there it can be incredibly difficult for people. It's typically where people want to quit. They want to go back home. They miss home. What was your journey like? Were you shocked? Was it challenging? Was it difficult? Was it a lifestyle change? What was it like for you?
I'm a very go with the flow kind of person. I did not very much research. I didn't even realize where I'd be living. Like, once I got stationed somewhere, barracks, what was that? I don't know. I just knew they were going to take care of me. So it was a big culture shock, a big melting pot. Females from all over the United States. It's the only place that females go to training. Parris Island, South Carolina. So there was just a big mix of different personalities. But I don't think that really came through until after you're out of boot camp, because in boot camp, you're just learning everything that's going on. So to answer that part of the question, I'm a little in for a shock. There was a lot of, a lot of stuff that didn't make sense, stuff that, you thought you did right, and you did do it right, but they would tell you that's not right. You got to do it again, over and over again. So there was times that I remember thinking, gosh, if I got sent home for whatever reason, I'd be okay with it. But I never cried or was upset in boot camp. Well, I take that back. I did cry one time when it was my birthday. Shed a little tear. But other than that, it wasn't. I knew what that this was my choice. So, but once you become a Marine and you're in the fleet, that's a whole different story, because you feel like you've done all this 13 weeks, you've done this time, and then there's really no difference. You get out and they just call you a recruit.
Did you feel different though?
Or excuse me, a Marine rather than a recruit.
Did you feel different, like, after those 13 weeks? Were you like, you're young, you're female, you're from a small town, like, big step to get out and make it through. So did you feel like I'm badass, basically?
And I felt like that. I felt like it was a great feeling on graduation day. And you're like, wow, I accomplished this. And I knew that couldn't be taken away from me. I knew that was something that I would always have. And to be able to be like, I'm a Marine, like you said, I'm a badass. This is great. So, but once I got into you go to school, and there was 4 girls to a room, a very small room. And that's where I kind of learned, oh, okay, this is everybody's raised different. It's one big melting pot here, and you just have to adapt and adjust. So,
Yeah.
So after you graduate what did your MOS being, your military occupational specialty?
Oh, so back to that business administration that I was guaranteed. I forgot to tell you. So I got strep throat, and I did not leave on the date that I was supposed to leave. I was delayed a few weeks. So I did not know, nor did I ask, gee, does my MOS stay the same? So I found out the hard way. It does not. I lost that because it went to someone else. So I was a food service supply, 3361. I basically was in charge of all of the food that came into the mess halls that you work at, cafeteria, inventory, rotating stock, all the way to MREs, which are those lovely meals ready to eat that can last 12 years.
So you go through your schooling. Where do you end up? What's your first duty station? Where'd you end up getting stationed at?
Yeah, so I went to school at Camp Johnson, North Carolina for about a month or two, the coldest place I've ever been in my life. And then I was stationed in 29 Palms, which is, gosh, how far from Palm Springs? Maybe 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Nothing like Palm Springs at all. There literally probably is 29 palms there and one flashing red light.
Yeah, it's the Marine Corps desert training. There's really not a lot out there. So you're 18 or 19 now, in that ballpark, probably 18. You're now in the Fleet Marine Force. You went from this small town into the Marine Corps, and are you studying on how to be a better Marine, or are you going out at night? Are you now being introduced to this whole entire Marine Corps lifestyle that so many have heard of?
I am not studying. I am enjoying meeting people. Yeah. Looking back, I probably should have studied a little bit more, but no, I was not.
And so was this a culture shock now? You went from going through boot camp and then going through school. It's very regimented, and everything is what time you have to be someplace. There's always someone watching over you. Now that you're in the Fleet Marine Force and you're dealing with all of these Marines, are you facing like sexual harassment? Is it rampant? Is it very common?
I mean, it was 94 at this time, so I'm hoping and I'm sure that times have probably changed, but it was, all over the place. I had never dealt with men that were so direct. But I also told myself, I mean, this is, I signed up for this. This is what comes with the territory. There were some moments that got a little more, not with leaders, but peers that were questionable. So that, but I just would handle it myself and, basically tell someone off or how I felt. And I mean, what are you going to do? Go to HR?
Do you feel the same about that now as you did then?
Oh, that's a good question, because I don't feel that anybody should be treated, a certain way because they're male, female, whatever. I feel like you have to have a little bit thicker skin, but I don't think you should have to put up with some of the things that were going on then. And I have to only assume that it's changed a lot in that many years.
Well, we talked to Talia, who is a more recent Marine. I think hers is even, I don't know how many years ago it was, but it sounds like it's still at least around. So it's just interesting to hear you say that it's what you signed up for. I think that's where the argument can be made.
No, you're right.
Is it? So just curious, after, hindsight is always different when you're young or when you're older. And I don't know if you think about your daughter in that situation. I was just curious. Yeah,
no, you're right. And I think sometimes you get desensitized.
Yeah.
And I've always been one too that is, okay, I can handle this myself. And if that doesn't work, then I'm going to go to the next level.
Yeah. So
that didn't have to happen, but no, I shouldn't have had to deal with some of the things that I dealt with, and nor would I want my daughter or granddaughter to. So when you say it that way, yeah.
So in the Marines, as far as leadership goes, can you talk us through any direct leadership? What was the leadership like for you?
Again, I'm going to say, that's what I signed up for. So I think it's probably some old school mentality, but I mean, it's the Marine Corps. It's jump how high, right? Or there's things you're doing that you're thinking, what in the world does this have to do with anything? Like, why are you having me repeat this over and over again? But if you're at a wartime situation, then you're just going to do what needs to be done. So that's just kind of my attitude and how it was. As far as the leaders that I had, I don't know that I reported to any females looking back. And I felt like I had more to prove at the time. Yeah. I unloaded, the produce that came in. So an example, I think 55-pound boxes of celery, 114 degree heat, fine, whatever. You're unloading all these boxes and cartons of milk and all that and heavy stuff. But there was leaders that were male that I think sometimes would give you extra tasks just to be like, hey, this is what you wanted. And so I just kind of just kept my mouth shut and did it.
And could you tell the difference in leaders? Like, did you have some people or some leaders that you saw people flock towards, or that maybe you gravitated towards versus the other ones, or were they pretty much the same across the board?
No, there were certain ones that had better, skills as far as, there's the hardcore, this is what I say, jump how high. Mm-hmm. And then there were leaders that were there to actually say, hey, I want to mold this Marine into someone else or, something else, something better. But I think that happens a little bit later in the career or as you're going up. I know I listened to Hobby's story and he made sergeant much quicker than most Marines do. And I had a little hiccup in my career, so I didn't get promoted as quickly.
Oh, we love talking about hiccups.
Yeah.
Tell us about this hiccup.
Yeah, just a minor hiccup. So I eloped while I was in the Marines. I was 18 years old. I knew this guy for about 4 months, and we had talked about getting married. But I mean, this was kids. Don't do this at home. I heard Mike Ferreira say on his, certain things, don't do this. Don't go elope. I don't recommend it. And right around this whole time, I made a really stupid mistake and I got a DUI. So it's called a court martial in the Marine Corps. You basically have a little court. So if you're married, usually your punishment is not as severe. And I knew that, okay, this guy and I are going to get married anyway someday. So let me just kind of fast forward and go elope because maybe my punishment won't be as severe, which is really stupid thinking. And I also would have gotten paid more for being married. And then to add to that, he was a Marine and he was kicked out due to alcohol abuse, which is very, very difficult to do. It was at that time. I mean, mainly you were getting like pats on the back for stupid stuff that Marines would do. So here I go elope in Vegas, and the next day is my punishment. And I was restricted to the barracks for 60 days, which was unheard of for anyone who was married. It usually was maybe 15 days, if that, or 30. And I remember he asked me, when did you get married? Yesterday. I mean, thank goodness nobody was hurt. I learned from that. It was a really stupid mistake, but I did get the 60 days. And what that means is, so I got busted in rank. I was a corporal at the time. I got busted down to a lance corporal. And then I had to check in for 60 days straight in my military uniform. It was like every 2 hours, all day. And then there was other things that were consequences, which I understand and did. But I knew that I was going to do either 4 years in the Marines or 20. Like, why sign up for 8, in my opinion, because it's 4-year enlistment times. And so I'm like, okay, this is going to set me back a little bit. And it did. But it is what it is, and you move on. And
so this is where I enter the story. So this is where, around this time, we knew each other, but you went and eloped. And we worked together. So at this time, I was
jelly.
I was a little bit jelly. I was telling you shouldn't get married. You shouldn't go, do this and these things. But tell us a little bit about the conversation you had with your parents and what took place, and then we'll dive into kind of how our story evolved.
Yeah, and I did know you. We worked together. Never thought anything about it. Didn't know I'd end up on a podcast with you. But I also took me a little time to tell my mom and dad. I may have failed to mention my dad's an ordained minister. So I told my parents after about 6 months, both situations, that I got a DUI. And I said, and by the way, I am married. And I mean, they knew him, but I mean, it was a shock and they had to kind of sink that in. And after they did, they said, my dad said, okay, let's marry you in the church, make it right. And we'll just have a big celebration. So here I am in Woodland at the Church of Christ, and you and 2 other Marines show up to this wedding.
Yeah, I'll take it over. I'll take it over
By
from you.
invite?
I was very surprised.
So at that time, I think the right word was all 3 of us were infatuated with Amy, and Woodland was a solid 6 to 8 hour drive from 29 Palms where we were stationed, and we were all young and not the brightest Marines. We were like, let's go stop this wedding. I was like, we're going to go stop this wedding.
Y'all 3 sound really bright to me.
Like, just can't marry this guy. So we jumped in the car and we drove out to Woodland, and we get to this wedding, and we may have had a couple of drinks, and we walk in and it's packed and it's a dry wedding. And was there a couple hundred people there? Mm-hmm. A couple hundred people there. And immediately the game plan changed, and we were just going to be guests. So we introduced ourselves to somebody, and they brought us back to see Amy, who was in her wedding dress before the wedding. And there was no way we were going to say anything other than congratulations. So myself and 2 other Marines, if you go back and watch the tape,
Tape, by the way. It's a VHS. I don't know if you know what that is.
Yeah, I was going to say so cute, but...
Yeah, we were sitting in the stand. So
I have I have it on VHS of him shaking hands with my ex.
Oh, we're watching this after
crazy
one day.
So, and I want to be sensitive to time. And so you get married, you get the formal marriage, and then fast forward, you end up getting orders overseas, as I do.
Correct. So you and I became friends, but it was still nothing that, I mean, when you get married, in my situation, you get married for life. So, I knew, and actually immediately after I got married, I thought, what in the world did I do? But divorce was not an option. My ex-husband was abusive. I think it was just 3 times, which is 3 times too many. But, I never thought I would ever put up with that. And the 3rd time I didn't, I was done, and he got his. But I just thought, what am I doing with my life? Like, what am I going to do now? I'm stuck. He didn't work, by the way, so I supported us. And so when the Marine Corps sent Anthony and I to Japan out of about 40 people, I just thought, okay, I'm going to bring my ex-husband, my ex now, obviously, I'm going to bring him over there. I'm going to make this right. And I got on that plane, and I remember you said, I remember seeing a mark on your ear. Was that from him? And I said, yeah, it was. And you're like, you know what? I really want to get to know you better, but whether you want that or not, you need to leave him. And we had a good conversation about it. You're like, and you were raised Christian as well. So you're like, your parents will understand. And so that was the best thing that probably ever happened to me, regardless if Anthony was around or not. It was me able to step away from the situation, look at it from another point of view. And I did tell my parents. We had a great conversation about that. They supported me 100%. And I actually never saw my ex-husband again.
Wow.
A year in Okinawa is where we were stationed. And we spend a year together, and we fall in love, and we come back, and little Johnny is with you. You're pregnant with our first.
That is correct. So, yep. So you were still overseas. I come back. I'm 21 years old, and I find out I'm pregnant. I mean, there wasn't a question, I don't think, of us being together. I think you think differently. I knew that, okay, here I am going to become a stepmother, a mother, here comes life at 110%.
Did that change plans for the military? Were you planning to re-enlist, or what? Was that a pivotal moment for you?
It was. As soon as I knew that I was pregnant, the Marine Corps wasn't going to put motherhood first. And I understood that. So I knew that. And it was right at the time I was actually found out I got pregnant, right when I was discharging from the Marines. So I did my 4 years, but it happened right at the very end.
And so what did you transition to? You're coming out of the Marine Corps and you're going through all of these life changes. Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do and who you wanted to be? And you're what? You're 21?
Yeah, I'm 21. I'm pregnant, and I needed to get a job ASAP before I started showing. So I went to a temp agency. I got hired on that Blue Shield. So I got hired on as a temp first and then permanent. I worked there. They were fine when they found out I was pregnant. I worked there from 98 to 2001. I became a lead rep, and I probably would have continued to climb there. I really enjoyed it, but I did choose to stay home after I had Donovan, our third.
And so what characteristics and what skills did you take away from the Marine Corps that you think you applied to, just at that time, to what you were doing in your new life, new service industry?
I took away thinking outside the box, having a voice, but in a respectful way, punctual, how to kind of adapt situations and overcome them. So I pride myself. I had perfect attendance for 3 years straight.
Good. And so then as you go through your 20s, you're raising your children, our children, and then you decide to open your own business. So walk us through that process in opening your own business.
Yeah, I didn't want to have latchkey kids for as long as I could. So you and I had talked about it, and I started taking some fitness classes in the community we used to live in. And I thought, gosh, what do I have to do to start teaching? So I found out, just get my certification. I started teaching classes and personal training. I was able to do that for 10 years. I loved it. And I was able to work around the kids' schedules because they, all 3 kids had 3 different start times and finish times. So I had to get them to where they were and all that good stuff. But I was still able to train and teach all throughout the day around it.
So you're managing, it's your own business. It's a small business and it was you, but it's still your own business. And 10 years is a long run. So you have repeat customers that are coming back to you. So tell us about your mindset on how you grew your following, how you engaged with people. And it seems like such a contrast from when I think of the Marine Corps and what I know, and yelling to, do 100 push-ups and run 50 miles, to now you're working with somebody on a personal training where you're teaching a class and they're paying you to do this. So walk us through that contrast and the relationships that you built and how you did that.
I think talking about personalities again and that disc training, and there's a couple others out there that are great. When you learn someone's personality and they're interested and they want to better themselves, and I went through it myself. I wasn't heavy all of my life or anything, but I was pretty big after I had Donovan. So they kind of saw that transition and would ask questions. And I'm not a very pushy person, just kind of a natural, just having a conversation and saying, yeah, you can do this too. It's easy. So just learning those people's personalities, what motivates them. Some people want to be checked in with quite often, daily. Some people want to be left alone, just check in with them once a week. Whatever motivates that person is what I would do. And I mean, when you see the results and they start seeing the results, I mean, you can't put a price on that.
And what was the hardest part as far as maybe it's towards having your own business, or maybe it is that part of engaging with people, but what would you say was the hardest part?
Gosh, I think for some people it comes very naturally to have all their spreadsheets and have everything in order and worry about that part of it. And I just never did. I mean, I had goals and things and what I needed to make per month, et cetera. But when you just kind of let that go, if you can, and obviously I had the support of Anthony, I think it makes you come across as more natural, which it takes away that part of it that you're, I've got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do that. Just let it be what it is. And if you can be more natural with people, they feel that. And I think they respond to that. So I had a pretty good following and I have relationships with people. And this was, years ago, 10,
it was
15
20
years ago. So
yeah, some of it 20 years ago. So, and that was going to be my question. Did you see yourself as their friend? Did you create friendships?
Absolutely. 100%.
I'm going to ask a question because I have insight, and so I can phrase this question. So if I asked you to do a presentation in front of a room of 25 people on wine, something that is near and dear to you, it would stress you out. It would drive you crazy. But if you had to go and teach a class in front of 50, like, you owned it. So walk us through that process, and how did you feel the first time you got up in front of that class versus you did this for years and you had packed classes.
Did you watch her?
Oh, I went to the classes.
my class.
Oh, you were in it. Oh, the story just keeps getting cuter.
Well, for the record, he would come to boot camp.
Yeah, I went to the hard
He didn't
class.
come to body sculpting as often.
Or Zumba, what's
Or
the dance
step
one?
or interval,
Oh,
but yeah, boot camp. And my kids did. Donovan wasn't old enough, but the other kids came. So that's, Anthony knows me 100%. I lost 5 pounds the first day that I was going to teach a class. I was so stressed out. I went over it and over it and over it.
Oh.
I probably didn't eat. I write everything down. And so all of my classes were written down in this laminated form, right? Just in case. But I never had to reference them. But it was there as my safety net, which was silly, but I always had to do that. So once I got comfortable, once I know something, then it's game on. I feel like I could have taught it at Golden One if you would have told me to at the time. Hey, we've got thousands in here. I would have loved it. But you tell me to get up and talk to somebody about something I don't know, forget it.
It's the preparation. So all that work that you put into it, I think when it's go time, you can turn it on, which is really cool.
And did any of your fears ever come to life? Like, your fears of presenting, your fears of, like, it was never as bad as you thought.
No, I would have dreams that I'd be teaching. I left my pants at home or something. Like,
Oh my gosh.
like, what am I gonna do if the music doesn't work? I mean, I've had people, pass out in classes. I mean, of course, I wasn't a hardcore teacher. It was just something that happened. But I mean, all these things that you don't plan for, and when they happen, you just go with it and you figure it out.
And so what would your advice be to people who are either they're starting a business, they have to do a presentation. It doesn't matter whether it's to an auditorium of people or 20 people or it's a school project. What would your advice be going through what you went through to get to where you're at? And what would you tell them?
It's not that big of a deal. Like, you really don't need to stress that much. But I remember that first day, I wanted to have a perfect class. Well, you know what? Life isn't perfect. And people were just happy that there was someone there to do this with them. So just go do it.
And then in the same universe, I guess is the word to use, same type of question. If someone's building their own business and it's a relationship type business, and there's a million of them, it could be a service type business, it could be insurance type business, it could be anything. What would your advice be as far as how to engage and build those relationships for someone who's just coming into that? And if it's not their core, like for you, this is your core. That's what you do really, really well. But for those, it's not their core and they have to learn. What advice would you give to people in how to engage and develop those relationships?
Just be natural. Don't try too hard. I think when people start trying too hard, and that happens to me often, job interviews, whatever, I start overthinking. So I think if someone's just natural, then that's when your true personality comes out and people can respond to that. So it's okay to just, you don't have to know the whole Bible to go to church. You don't have to be financially stable to have kids, or you're probably never gonna have kids. Like, just, you got to start somewhere.
That's really good advice.
It is. It's great advice, and we balance each other out because I'll stress about it. But how do you view yourself within your community and your group of friends? Like, or actually, 2 questions: how would others view you? What do you think they'd say about you, and how do you view yourself?
Is this now? Maybe it's the same. Is this now, or are you asking her at this time? The time of the business.
I'd say throughout. I don't think there's a difference in knowing Amy. So with all of your friends, how would they describe you?
I mean, I see myself as fun, but I don't know that I'm the life of the party. I think I'm, a fun person. I think, and from what I've heard, that I make people feel good. So I just genuinely care when I ask, like I said, how was your day? I'm not just asking it to go through the motions. And if somebody's had a hard time, I want to hear about it, and kind of what's going on. I'm like that hairdresser that you can talk to and tell all your stuff to.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're being humble here. So yes, you are definitely fun, but people come to you, and they lean on you when they're facing trouble or they need a friend. They'll knock on the door and, I'll go to the other room or they'll call you on the phone. So it's not just the fun part. I think it's the overall well-rounded. Didn't know if you saw yourself that way. So figured I'd tell you while we're sitting on a podcast.
Okay.
And I think it's underrated sometimes. So when you say something like you actually genuinely care, I think there is a difference between those who ask the question or know they should ask the question. Like, yeah, I should check in with my people, but you can't fake that. Like, if you actually don't care, even if you're willing to ask the question, I think that you lose engagement right away. Not as bad as somebody who doesn't ask the question at all, but I think that that's just the way you put it is I just came to mind as like, yeah, it's just an underrated quality is like you truly care. That I think is what allows you to connect with people.
Interesting. We'll see if I listen back to this and take that tidbit away.
So I want to get into some of our staple questions. And before we do, I have a couple of different questions for you, just because you're my wife and Natasha, you're going to get to sit in and hear some of these. So when you think of not just our 3 kids, but all of their significant others. So one's married, actually, 2 are married because Johnny and Megan just got married. And Donovan and Jess Miles will be married. They're, on that path, but they're all family. So those kids, but all kids in general, and the grandbabies, what's your life advice for them? What's advice do you have for that generation?
Well, I didn't think I'd bring back the personality test again, but I think that every couple, in fact, anybody, any relationship that you have with somebody should do a personality test. It was very helpful for us and for me to understand kind of where your thinking was coming from. So that would be one thing. And another thing I think I would say is just, things will work out. There are mistakes that people can make, but that's how you learn. And there's nothing that they could do or anybody close to me or anyone that I know that could do that would be bad enough, right? That you don't talk to that person anymore. Or there's people who are in a situation that think, I cannot get through this. How am I going to? I don't see the light at the end. But there's someone else who's probably gone through the same thing you've gone through. And if it's, it's probably magnified in your head and no one's going to remember it in a few months, years, whatever the situation may be. So talk about it and it's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I since our kids are going to be listening, I'm going to give the advice as well. No one's going to remember in a week what you're going through. If you think back to what was maybe in a week, you might remember the stress that you had. But if you think back to a month, definitely a year, unless there was a tragedy. So take out the big extremes. Mm-hmm. You can't tell me what you were stressed about 52 weeks ago. Yeah. You don't remember what it is. And it's a waste of energy and it's a waste of time. And focusing in on the things that you can control is what, would be my great parenting advice to all of my kids and my friends that are millennials. So I do want to get into our staple questions. So do you want me to go first or do you want to go first? How do you want to go?
Well, you go first because you kind of just took my staple question a little bit, but I'll ask it differently, kind of. Go ahead.
I'm gonna feel that one later. Okay, so I have a couple of them. So how would you define success?
Happiness. I mean, what's life if you're not happy? So, I think just being happy. I'm a pleaser. So knowing that, my kids are happy and things like that, I feel successful when everything's going okay. And, it's not always going to, but for the most part, if folks can find happiness in things, life's going to be a little bit brighter, a lot brighter.
Yeah, I agree. And I love it. So if you had one conversation that you could have with one person, whether you know them, you don't know them, alive or dead, who would that person be and why?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I know you ask it, so I thought about it. I think I would have a conversation with the person who shot you in the face.
Very interesting. Why? Why that person of all of the people you could talk to? Why that person?
When I met you, I knew you'd been shot, and I didn't know this guy, and I was very angry at him. And you kind of taught me like forgiveness on a whole nother level. I used to hold a grudge and stuff over stupid stuff when I was little. So I personally would want to sit down. I mean, you've mentioned, and I don't know if you ever would, if it came the opportunity that you would sit down and have a conversation with him, but I would kind of like, want to pick his brain. And I know there are many other people that I could pick, but I'm just kind of curious, kind of, what he was going through and thinking. If I sat down with him 20 years ago, I probably would have punched him in the face. But now I'm like, okay, like.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. I'm not interested on that day, but yeah, I'd sit down, I'd have a beer. I'm interested on what's happened since and where's life taken him. And
so many unanswered questions, literally just questions.
There's a lot of questions. So for the people that are listening and you have a way to make it happen, Natasha's willing to interview us and sit down and we'll have a conversation. So maybe you just open a doorway for all of us, and maybe we can see if we can make that conversation happen.
Oh, that would be, I better prep my questions ahead of time on that one. So I have to game time pivot a little bit because, I asked, I always ask, what advice would you give your 30-year-old self? But since your kids aren't all quite 30 and you gave that advice, I think it's probably the same. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, but just for you, where do you think you've grown the most in your life? Just personally as one, and then professionally as two.
Ooh, that's good. By the way, there's a lot of advice that I could give my 30-year-old self, not just one thing.
I mean, you could lay it on us and give you time to think about my second question.
I have learned a few things, and one is, if you make a mistake, own it. And I know that sounds pretty simple, but I have actually witnessed coworkers like backtracking or thinking they're going to get out of something. And I mean, just come on, you made a mistake. Like we all do. So as long as you learn from it, it's okay. And I remember I had made a mistake and I was freaking out. And Anthony's like, okay, just talk to whoever you need to talk to and own it. And I did. And I felt so much better. And, it wasn't a big deal. Mm-hmm. I also, on the professional level, think that, no matter where you are in your career, whether it's, I don't know what word to use these days, but I would say, on the times that you're low on the totem pole, you think that your opinion doesn't matter or your ideas don't matter. And I disagree on that. I think that people get intimidated by higher ups. And I think that, we all put our pants on one leg at a time, and it's okay to have a conversation in a respectful manner. Or if there's a suggestion that you have, companies aren't going to grow if you're not saying, there's no stupid questions. There might be some silly ideas, but I think if you're bringing up a problem, your solution, you might not have the solution, but that brings that to their attention to go, okay, there is a problem here. So let's look at how we can fix it. And so, that makes sense. Don't be intimidated because somebody's, at a higher level than you. We have that respect, of course, but they're people.
Yeah. And is that, so on the professional side, do you is personal as well? Is that where you've grown?
On the
personally?
Yeah, on the a little bit there too on the personal side that I've grown, but I think I've always been kind of just go with it, just do it, like figure it out later. So I do need to plan a little bit better, add some planning, but if there's something that you want to do, just go do it. I think, and this ties in a little bit professional as well, but mistakes can be fixed. And that's one thing that I feel like if you have a good leader, or even in your personal life, if you go and do something and you take a chance and it doesn't work out, so what? I mean, you all know those sayings. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't try. So
Yeah, you got to chase it. Chase whatever your dream is, small or big, it doesn't matter what it is.
Whether it's Amy at the altar with another guy.
You go for it.
Whatever it is, you go for it. So I'm going to jump in. Just give us real quick, because since you opened what's the advice you give to your 30-year-old self?
It was a lot of that. It was don't stress out, don't judge people, don't, judge a book by its cover. But I think that would be, it's okay to say no. Again, being a pleaser, it's always like, yes, yeah, oh yeah, I got it. And then you overwhelm yourself, and it is okay. Like if you feel like you have too much on your plate, just have that conversation or communicate. You don't have to say yes to everything. And I notice that sometimes too with our kids, they say yes to things and then you dread because you said yes. So why would you want to, go through with what you committed to? If it's something that's not going to make you happy, why waste that time? So it's okay to just be like, you know what? I can't make it, or no, I can't take that on right now. Yeah,
it's definitely something that comes with time. It gets a lot easier the older you get to say, that's not where I'm going to invest my day.
Right.
You just get tired of it. You're like, yeah. Literally can't do it anymore. I take note for sure. So we have our question from the last guest, if you are ready for it. So he asked, when were you the most vulnerable in your career?
I think the thing that comes to mind, because it's fairly fresh, was earlier this year, was I was laid off, which was the first time that I've ever been laid off. And I just remember you really can't ask questions. I mean, it was a Zoom, but my first thought was I felt embarrassed. It came to a surprise to me. I was one of the top producers. I felt that I was doing a good job. And so it just came kind of as a shock. And so I think it's you just feel, like I said, I felt embarrassed, kind of like insulted. I wanted to be like, well, hey, wait, well, what's this? How come? And Anthony was working from home that day. And so I had to come out of the room, and I was actually surprised. I was like, I know, I just looked at him. I'm like, I got laid off. And he's like, okay, and I'm like, but was it this? Was it that? Was it that? And he said, you could ask yourself a million different reasons why. It doesn't matter. And this is where you're at. It happens all the time. He was super supportive, but it was just that pang of like, wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. And of late it's been in the news, but hundreds of thousands of people get laid off. And there's so many different reasons, whether it's budgets, whether it's a good fit, you'll never know. And there's all of these emotions that come along with it, and they're all justified emotions. So my follow-up question would be to how long did it take you to work through those emotions and then get to a good spot and then start to move on?
I think I had to kind of digest it. I think it probably took a few weeks to go, okay. Because I remember telling you, I'm going to get a job right now. I got to update my resume. And you're like, oh, okay, calm down. So I think once I didn't take it as personally, I looked at a few things that maybe I could have done better or bettered myself. But I am a believer of that everything happens for a reason. And so I thought, all right, it was a shock, but it was like, okay, there's a reason this is happening, and a new door will open. And it did. So I just decided, all right, we had a conversation and things we needed to adjust and whatnot, and what time I would start looking again. But it's definitely not the end of the world, and take those skills and go somewhere else with it.
Good. Very good.
As you are. Yeah, it's good. Moving forward. Well, good for you. Making it through.
So what is your question for the next guest? What question do you want to ask?
Literally every single episode. And I say this on every single episode, and I literally wrote it down, and I always forget to ask.
I was looking right at you.
I know. It's so frustrating.
My question would be, what area could you most improve upon in your work life?
Very good question. Very good question.
Anthony. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh, we're asking. No. What area could you most improve on in your professional life?
Correct.
So I think that brings us to our inspire question. And you've been with us on the podcast or supporting us since the beginning. And so it's evolved over time. But what's still important to us as we talk to people in just these conversations is you're going to inspire someone. We hope these podcasts inspire somebody. But from each of our guests, we want to know who or what inspires you and why.
Why am I surprised you're asking me this?
Of all the staple questions,
I know.
This is the one.
I'm inspired by a lot. Probably my whole entire family. And for many different reasons. All three of my children have different personalities. I know the conversations I can have with each one. And I can also go to my dad for certain things and my mom for certain things, to you for certain things, Anthony, that it just, I think I'm very lucky and blessed, but maybe if people know, just go ask for help when you need it and go to the people that not are just going to make you feel good in that situation, but someone who's going to obviously be there to support you, but maybe have a little nugget of advice for you as well to help you grow.
Yeah. And that is what family is for. Someone in the family is always going to be the one to give you that.
Yeah.
Not only the support, but the good advice. That's really good.
And sometimes I just talk to my weenie dogs.
Oh, they're the best listeners. Best listeners.
Exactly.
So it's been an incredible hour. I know the story and I still learn new things. So thank you for all of the support on the podcast and everything that we're doing. And those that follow us and see the pictures, they get to see it. And I get to hear Amy's story, a piece of Amy's story, because if we let Amy go, it would definitely be like a 10 episode series.
We'll get into like the part 2, 3. We can do it.
But thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I know that he knows more of all the story, but I was hoping there would be some things that he got out of it as well as our listeners. And so agree the support. You're always there for us and all of that good stuff. So you're a light, as I tell a lot of our guests, and that's exactly who we want to be here. So just appreciate your time and taking us through.
Thank you, guys.
All right, I'll close us out. Gramps, Millennial, and Grandma out.